After my older sister Cecilia and I hit adulthood, our parents dropped a bomb. One of us had to run the family business. The other had to marry into the Spencer family in Norwich City. Cecilia, blinded by greed, called dibs on the company without blinking. Problem was she was all talk. Spent her days jet-setting and partying while the business tanked. In a year, she burned it all to the ground. Me, I got the Spencer name and popped out 2 boys, locking in my spot as the rich wife. Cecilia couldn't handle it. Jealousy made her snap. She straight up stabbed me at a family party. Next thing I knew, I was back on the day we had to choose. Cecilia didn't even pause. I'll marry into the Spencer family. The business can go to Demi. I laughed. My poor clueless sister. She had no idea she was walking straight into hell. I fell for Mike Spencer the second I saw him. I want to be with him. Demi's way smarter. She'll totally crush it running the company. Our parents looked ready to hand me over to the Spencers. But Cecilia freaked. Her face turned bright red like she was about to combust. Girl was desperate to snag Mike and steal her spot as the wife of some rich heir. Funny thing, just a few days ago, she was out here flexing about being a boss babe. Now she'd flipped the script completely. Mom and Dad were, too, stunned to say anything. Totally thrown off by how fast she switched at me. I stayed quiet on the couch, flipping through the company's finances with a smirk. Even with a second shot at life, Cecilia couldn't help crashing headfirst into the same mess. Mom kept quiet, but Dad had thoughts. As usual, Cecilia, it's better to count on yourself. Sure, he might like you now, but people change. I've heard things about Mike not exactly glowing. Just think about it. I don't want you getting hurt. He wasn't wrong. Banking your whole life on some guy. Dumbest move ever. Dad had seen it too many times. Men ditching their day won wives the second they got rich. The women who stuck around got left in the dust. No surprise he didn't want that fate for us. Cecilia wasn't having it. Maybe she remembered how good I had it in my last life. Chauffeured in luxury cars, stacked bank account, and 2 picture-perfect sons everyone envied. She clung to the idea that marrying Mike beat running the company and watching it crash. Dad's warning went in one ear, out the other. She even poked her ear, annoyed. Oh, Dad, that's just 'cause those women were useless. I'm gorgeous and charming. He'd be lucky to have me. Why would he leave? You've met him. He's a total gentleman. Those rumors are trash. She looked like she already had the trophy in hand, eyes glowing with pure delusion to her. This was a dream path. Why hustle through endless meetings and travel when you could sip wine and hit parties as a pampered housewife? I dropped my head, fighting back a laugh. Mike might play the polished prince in public, but behind closed doors, full-on monster. He ought his way up as an illegitimate son in the Spencer fam. And trust me, whatever it took to get there wasn't pretty. He made me schmooze nonstop, for drinks down my throat till I puked blood, and couldn't care less if something didn't go his way. He'd hit me. I was rocking long sleeves in the middle of July, just to hide the bruises. The Spencers, total snake pit. Power games, fake smiles, nonstop backstabbing. That house didn't just ruin you, it swallowed you whole. How could that even compare to peacefully running the family business? But she was set. Our parents just sighed and retreated to their room, done arguing. On her way out, Cecilia tossed me a smug little smirk. Demi, when the company crashes and you're broke, hit me up. Maybe I'll let you carry my purse. I grinned. We'll see who ends up begging. Poor thing's so lucky. She gets to be smacked around by her doting husband and trashed by her lovely in-laws. Meanwhile, I'm stuck crying in my billion-dollar office. Oh, and occasionally hiring a few hot guys for fun. Cecilia and Mike's wedding was straight out of a magazine. Held at the iconic Centennial Hotel, packed with industry elites. Dressed in a custom gown, Cecilia was glowing with pride, arrogance practically dripping off her as she made her rounds. She dragged Mike over to toast me. Clearly just a flex Demi. First time meeting your brother-in-law, huh? When your business tanks, maybe he'll toss you a lifeline. Women shouldn't have to work so hard anyway. You should have found a man. 2. Bad luck skipped you. She really thought she'd finally won. That look on her face, pure victory. Mike gave me a polite nod, playing the part. But the second her tone turned smug, I caught the flicker in his eyes, his brow twitching. I knew that look. I'd lived it. He was already sick of her. Cecilia was a walking disaster. Once Mike's interest fizzled, she was toast. When I didn't react, she figured I was just bitter. Threw a few more jabs, then strutted off, clinging to Mike like she'd bagged a prize. I didn't have time for her drama, anyway. I'd just taken over the company. Networking was the real win tonight. Half the city's power players here. I grabbed a drink and got to work. In my past life, Cecilia thought she was some business queen who didn't need to respect anyone. She blew off potential partners, and acted like the rules didn't apply to her. That arrogance got her blacklisted by the powerful Felton family. Before dessert was even served, not me. I played its smart cards out. Smile on left the right kind of impression on all the right people. Just as I was finally catching my breath, chaos popped off in the middle of the hall. You bumped into me on purpose. But you think I'm blind trying to ruin my wedding day? Do you even know who my husband is? Cecilia, all sweet and glowy 5 seconds ago, now had fire in her eyes, snapping at some poor girl. The girl looks like she was about to cry. Clearly not built for this kind of public meltdown. I didn't mean to. I was looking for my brother and accidentally bumped into you. I already apologized. She stood frozen, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, everyone staring like she was some villain. It was barely a thing. Definitely not worth a meltdown. But Cecilia saw her chance to flex and wasn't about to let it slide. This dress was flown in from France. You stepped on it. You couldn't afford a single thread. Who even are you? Some servant who snuck in? Everyone in that elite circle knew each other. So when she didn't recognize the girl, she pounced. Clearly figured she'd found a nobody to humiliate. The girl looked seconds from crying. I couldn't just watch Cecilia. Come on, it's your wedding. She didn't mean it. Let it go. That wiped the smug off her face fast. She sneered. How do you know she didn't do it on purpose? Maybe she's jealous. Of my marriage. I've seen her type before. Desperate and bitter. You defending her? What did you plant her to wreck my day? Didn't expect her to go full psycho. My smile dropped cold. But before I could fire back, a voice sliced through the tension. The Spencer family really picked a gem. I turned toward the shadows. Some guy had slipped in, tall, sharp, and absolutely radiating don't mess with me energy. His face ridiculously perfect, but right now he looks like a storm ready to wreck everything. Silence hit the room like a slap. Then someone whispered, Felton, boom, chaos. Terence Felton, the Felton family's top dog. Straight up Norwich royalty. One raised eyebrow from him could crash a company. Most of us wouldn't even breathe the same air as him. People started whispering fast. Why the hell was he here? Only one person looked relieved. Like, she just spotted her personal hero. The girl ran straight into his arms, tears spilling. Terence, you know I didn't mean to. Mike's dad, old and sly, jumped in first. Mr. Felton, big misunderstanding, that's all. He went in for a handshake. Terence dodged it like nothing and locked eyes with Cecilia. So many witnesses. Wouldn't be fair to let this slide, right? Let's just roll the security footage. Cecilia froze like someone hit pause. She whipped toward Mike, panicked. Babe, come on. No need for that. I swear it was an accident. I'm sorry. Too late. Terence didn't even blink. At her drama, one wave and boom. Security footage lit up the big screen. There she was, glaring daggers after spotting Mike all over some other girl. Too chicken to call him out. She zeroed in on the quietest target, Miss Felton. She stormed over and slammed into her. Totally on purpose. Rest. Everyone already saw it live. Cecilia's face went tomato red as the receipts played out. She looked at Mike, eyes screaming, do something. But Mike, barely clinging to his spot in the Spencer family, was already fuming, getting dragged into this mess. I just lit the fuse. No shot. He was bailing her out now. Terence stayed cool. If the Spencers have a problem with my sister, let's just cancel all pending orders. One line. That's all it took to torch everything the Spencers had hustled for. With the Feltons, Mike's grandpa straight up fainted. The room exploded. Everyone knew you don't cross Terence Felton and walk away clean. They swarmed him with apologies. But Terence didn't even glance their way. Just took his sister and walked. Then right as he passed me, he stopped. The entire ballroom held its collective breath. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Terence Felton turned his head slowly, his cold, dark eyes locking onto me. For a second, I thought he was going to lump me in with the rest of the Spencer-adjacent trash. Instead, his gaze dropped to my posture, relaxed, drink in hand, utterly unbothered by the nuclear fallout happening 3 feet away. You defended her, Terence said. His voice was low, smooth, but it carried across the dead silent room. I didn't flinch. I took a slow sip of my champagne. I defended common sense. Your sister didn't do anything wrong. My sister just has a habit of barking at things she doesn't understand. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. You didn't just insult the bride at her own wedding, and you definitely didn't speak to Terence Felton with that kind of casual flippancy. But Terence's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, exactly, but it was the closest thing to it. He reached into the inner pocket of his bespoke suit, pulling out a sleek, matte black card. He didn't hand it to me. He placed it gently on the edge of the cocktail table next to my glass. Call my office Monday, he said, his tone shifting from warlord to businessman. The Felton Group likes people with common sense. We might have some contracts your family's company could handle. I'll have my assistant set it up, I replied smoothly, picking up the card. Terrence gave a single, curt nod, wrapped his arm protectively around his sister, and walked out the double doors. The second the doors swung shut, the room exploded into absolute pandemonium. But the loudest sound wasn't the murmuring crowd. It was the sharp, cracking echo of flesh hitting flesh. Smack. I turned my head. Cecilia was on the floor, her custom French lace gown pooling around her like spilled milk. Her hand was pressed against her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. Above her stood Mike, the perfect gentleman. His face was twisted into an ugly, venous snarl, his knuckles white. "You stupid bitch," Mike hissed, his voice venomous enough to melt steel. "Do you have any idea what you just cost me? What you just cost my family?" Mike's father was violently shaking the unconscious Grandpa Spencer, screaming for a medic. The industry elites, the ones Cecilia had been flexing for 10 minutes ago, were already edging toward the exits. Nobody wanted the stench of a Felton blacklisting to rub off on them. Cecilia looked up at Mike, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. "Mike, baby, I didn't know." "Shut up," he roared, grabbing her by the arm and hauling her to her feet like a rag doll. He didn't care who was watching. He didn't have to. The facade was gone. I stood there, sliding Terrence Felton's card into my clutch. Cecilia caught my eye as Mike dragged her toward the back hallways. The smugness, the arrogance, the delusion, it was all completely drained from her face, replaced by a raw, suffocating terror. She was looking at me for help. I just smiled, raised my champagne glass in a silent toast, and walked out. The wedding was over. It was time to get to work. Chapter 2. The Snake Pit and the Corner Office. By Monday morning, my life was a blur of spreadsheets, board meetings, and ruthless restructuring. Our family business, Vance Industries, was bleeding money. In my past life, Cecilia had tried to fix it by throwing expensive parties to woo clients, blowing through our capital while the core infrastructure rotted. I took a different route. I brought a machete. I fired the deadweight executives who had been coasting on my dad's goodwill. I liquidated the luxury company cars Cecilia had ordered. And at 10 a.m. sharp, I called the number on the matte black card. Terrence Felton didn't make me wait. By Wednesday, I was sitting in his penthouse office. We didn't talk about the wedding. We talked numbers, supply chains, and profit margins. I was ruthless. He was worse. We got along perfectly. By the time I left, Vance Industries had secured a massive logistics contract with the Felton Group. It was the shot of adrenaline my company needed. Cecilia, meanwhile, was experiencing her own kind of adrenaline. It took exactly 3 weeks for her to make the first phone call. I was in my billion-dollar office, reviewing quarterly projections, when my private line rang. "Demi?" Her voice was a cracked whisper. It sounded like she was hiding in a closet. "To what do I owe the pleasure, Mrs. Spencer?" I asked, leaning back in my leather chair. Did the chauffeur take a wrong turn? Did they run out of caviar at the country club? "Demi, please," she sobbed. "You have to help me. Mike, he's crazy. His family, they blame me for the Felton deal falling through. They cut off my allowance. They won't let me leave the estate without a guard. And Mike, She choked on her words. "He hits me, Demi. Over everything. He made me drink an entire bottle of scotch last night just because I spoke out of turn at dinner." I stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. The Norwich skyline looked beautiful today. "That sounds like a you problem, Cece," I said, my voice deadpan. "What?" "I'm your sister. You can't just leave me here. Tell Mom and Dad." "Tell them what?" I interrupted, my tone turning to ice. "Dad warned you. He told you Mike wasn't a good guy. He told you not to bank your life on a man. You mocked him. You pointed to your gorgeous face and said he'd never leave you. Well, congratulations. He hasn't left you. You got exactly what you asked for." "Demi, please. I'm scared." "Should have chosen the business, babe," I said, echoing her old condescending tone. "Anyway, I have a meeting with Terrence Felton. Can't chat." I hung up and blocked the number. I didn't feel a drop of pity. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel the cold steel of the knife she drove into my stomach in our past life. She had murdered me because she couldn't handle the consequences of her own incompetence. This life, this was karma, perfectly balanced. Chapter 3. The Desperate Play. 6 months passed. Vance Industries didn't just recover, it skyrocketed. With the Felton Alliance backing me, we swallowed up smaller competitors and dominated the regional logistics market. I was on the cover of Forbes Business, dubbed the Iron Queen of Norwich. The Spencer family, on the other hand, was bleeding out. Losing the Feltons had created a domino effect. Banks pulled their loans. Investors jumped ship. Mike, desperate to secure his place as the heir, was running out of options. His legitimate brothers were circling him like vultures, ready to strip him of his title. And then Mike got an idea. A very, very stupid idea. It started with a sudden visit from my parents. They walked into my office, looking exhausted and aged. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. "Demi," Dad started, pacing the room. Cecilia came to see us. She looks terrible. She's lost so much weight. She was wearing sunglasses indoors. She's paying the idiot tax, Dad, I said, not looking up from my laptop. Demi, she needs money, Mom blurted out. Mike told her that if she can secure the bid for the Southside Development Project, his family will forgive her. They'll treat her right again. He promised he'd stop drinking. Stop hitting her. I stopped typing. The Southside Development Project. It was the biggest government contract of the decade. I had been prepping Vance Industries to bid on it for months. If the Spencers got it, it would save their company. And, I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She asked us to give her your bidding data, Dad admitted, looking ashamed. She knows you have the inside track. She begged us, Demi. She was on her knees. I stared at them. In my past life, Cecilia had ruined this company, and they had covered for her out of love. Now, she was trying to cannibalize my hard work to save her own miserable skin. Did you give it to her? I asked. No, Dad said quickly. We told her we didn't have access. But Demi, she's desperate. Mike is going to kill her if she doesn't deliver. Mike is going to ruin her regardless, I corrected him. But thank you for telling me. After they left, I sat in silence for a long time. Cecilia was desperate. And a desperate rat will chew through anything to escape a trap. If she couldn't get the data from our parents, she'd try something else. A mole. A hack. I smiled. It was a cold, jagged thing. I picked up my phone and called Terrence. Felton. His voice was brisk as always. I need a favor, I said. Mike Spencer is looking for a lifeline. I'm going to give him an anvil. Are you in? I could practically hear the shark-like grin on Terrence's face through the receiver. I'll have my legal team draft the dummy contracts by midnight. Come over to my place. We'll plot the execution over scotch. Chapter 4. The Trojan Horse. It took me 3 days to find the rat in my company. It was a mid-level analyst named Greg. He had sudden, unexplained deposits in his bank account, and his keycard had swiped into the archives after hours. Instead of firing him, I promoted him. I gave Greg access to a highly secured, encrypted folder titled Southside Project, Final Bids. Inside were meticulously crafted blueprints, financial projections, and cost analyses. They looked flawless. They were signed off by industry experts. They were also entirely, utterly fake. The numbers were manipulated so brilliantly that only someone who thoroughly understood the soil composition of the Southside District would realize the trap. The land was sitting on a massive, hidden sinkhole. Building there required specialized foundation tech that tripled the cost. My fake files completely omitted that detail, projecting massive profits with minimal investment. I watched the server logs from my phone while having dinner with Terrence. Right on cue, at 2 a.m., Greg downloaded the files. The bait is taken, I told Terrence, swirling the red wine in my glass. Terrence leaned back, watching me with an expression of pure, unadulterated respect. Over the last 6 months, our business alliance had morphed into something deeper. We were two apex predators who understood each other. No fake smiles, no games. Spencer is going to bid the absolute minimum to undercut the market, based on your fake numbers, Terrence calculated, his dark eyes gleaming. When he wins the bid, he'll be legally bound to complete the project. When he hits this sinkhole, he'll have to absorb the catastrophic costs, I finished. He'll bankrupt the entire Spencer family trying to fix it. Brutal, Terrence murmured. He reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing mine. I love it. A week later, the city held the open auction for the Southside project. The room was packed. I sat in the front row, wearing a tailored crimson suit, projecting absolute confidence. Across the aisle, Mike Spencer sat with Cecilia. Cecilia looked like a ghost. She was dressed in expensive designer clothes, but they hung off her frail frame. A thick layer of foundation couldn't hide the yellowish bruise fading on her jawline. But when she saw me, a flicker of her old arrogance returned. She leaned into Mike, whispering something and pointing at me. Mike smirked. When the bidding started, I came out strong. I threw down aggressive numbers, playing the part of the hungry CEO desperate to win. Mike countered every bid, his eyes locked on me with manic glee. He thought he was outsmarting me. He thought he was using my own stolen data against me. Finally, the auctioneer called out a number that was dangerously close to the fake bottom line I had planted. I stood up, acting furious. I slammed my folder shut. This is absurd. The margins are too thin. Vance Industries withdraws. The room buzzed. Mike leaped out of his chair, pumping his fist. The Spencers take the bid, he shouted. Cecilia looked at me, a victorious sneer twisting her pale face. She mouthed the words, I won. I gave her a sad, slow shake of my head, picked up my briefcase, and walked out. Chapter 5. The Collapse. It took exactly 2 months for the bomb to detonate. Groundbreaking on the Southside project began in April. By the second week of May, the Spencer family's excavators hit the subterranean sinkhole. The structural integrity of the entire district was compromised. The city inspectors halted construction immediately, fining the Spencers millions of dollars for environmental negligence. To fix the foundation, the Spencers had to pour liquid concrete into a bottomless pit, bleeding cash by the hour. Mike tried to back out of the contract, but the city sued for breach of agreement. The banks, smelling blood in the water, called in all their loans. In less than 60 days, the Spencer empire was reduced to ashes. I watched it all happen from the comfort of my penthouse, sipping coffee while reading the headlines on my tablet. Spencer heir arrested for fraud. Family files for bankruptcy. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Terrence. Turn on the news. Channel 4. Checkmate. I flicked on the massive flat screen. Live cameras were stationed outside the Spencer estate. Repo men were hauling out antique furniture, sports cars, and paintings. And standing on the front lawn, screaming like a lunatic, was Mike. He was being restrained by 2 police officers, wildly kicking at the air. She did this. My wife. She set me up. Her sister planted the data. The camera panned to Cecilia. She was sitting on the curb, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching a single designer purse. Her perfect life was being loaded into moving trucks to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. The Spencer family had officially legally disowned Mike, throwing him and Cecilia to the wolves. I turned off the TV. The game was over. I had won. Chapter 6. Begging. Later that evening, it was raining. The kind of heavy, freezing rain that soaked into your bones. I was working late at the office when my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Vance, there's a woman downstairs. She's completely soaked. Security is trying to remove her, but she's screaming your name. Let her up, I said softly. A few minutes later, the elevator doors chimed. Cecilia stumbled out. She looked nothing like the radiant, arrogant bride who had mocked me at the Centennial Hotel. Her hair was matted to her skull. Her designer clothes were ruined, stained with mud and rain. She didn't have any jewelry left. Mike had likely pawned it all to pay for his lawyers. Her face was swollen, bruised, and hollow. She collapsed onto the thick carpet of my office, shivering violently. Demi, she gasped, her voice shattered. Demi, please. I didn't get up from my chair. I simply spun a silver pen between my fingers, watching her. You did this, she sobbed, crawling toward my desk. You knew the data was fake. You knew he'd steal it. You destroyed us. Correction, I said, my voice echoing coldly in the massive room. I built a trap. You and your husband were the ones greedy enough to step into it. If you hadn't tried to steal from your own blood, you wouldn't be bankrupt. He beat me, Demi, she screamed, slamming her hands against the floor. He found out the data was fake, and he beat me until I threw up blood. I have nothing. No house, no money, no family. Mom and Dad won't even answer my calls. Funny, I mused, leaning forward. I distinctly remember you telling me, when your company crashes and you're broke, hit me up. Maybe I'll let you carry my purse. Cecilia froze. Her eyes widened, realizing I was throwing her own venom right back into her face. I stood up, walking around the desk until I was towering over her. The sound of the rain lashing against the glass was deafening. You thought being a trophy wife was the ultimate prize, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You thought you could coast through life, letting a monster do the heavy lifting while you drank champagne. You looked down on the hustle. You looked down on me. You thought you were smarter. I crouched down, forcing her to look me in the eye. Look at me, Cecilia. Look at where your choices brought you. She looked up. She saw the billion-dollar view behind me. She saw the custom suit, the absolute power radiating from my stance. And for the first time in her miserable, shallow life, she saw the truth. She hadn't been tricked. She had beaten herself. What am I supposed to do? She whimpered, her spirit completely broken. I stood back up and walked over to my desk. I pulled a crisp $100 bill from my wallet and dropped it on the floor next to her trembling hands. Buy an umbrella, I said. And get out of my building. You're getting mud on the rug. Cecilia stared at the money. A wail of pure, agonizing despair tore from her throat. She snatched the bill, scrambled to her feet, and ran for the elevator, sobbing hysterically. I watched the floor numbers tick down until she hit the lobby. Then I turned around and poured myself a drink. The door to my private office swung open, and Terrence walked in, shrugging off his wet overcoat. He glanced at the muddy footprints on the carpet. Janitorial is going to be annoyed, he remarked, walking over to the bar and pouring himself a glass to match mine. I'll give them a bonus, I said, smiling genuinely for the first time all day. Terrence walked over, wrapping a strong arm around my waist and pulling me close. So, the Queen of Norwich has finally dealt with the peasants. What's next on the agenda? I looked out at the city. The Spencers were gone. Cecilia was a ghost. The trauma of my past life had been burned away, replaced by an empire of my own making. I held all the cards, and I had a king standing right beside me. Tomorrow, we buy up the Spencers' liquidated assets for pennies on the dollar, I said, clinking my glass against his. Tonight, we celebrate. Terrence smirked, his eyes dark with promise. I've always loved your business plans, Demi. The rain outside continued to fall, washing the filth from the streets of Norwich. But inside my tower, everything was perfect. I took a sip of my drink, looking down at the city lights. Hell really was a place on earth. And I was so glad I had sent my sister there.